Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tabor Swatsky. I am with Gopher, and I'd like to welcome all of you to today's Gopher Solutions webinar. For those of you who are new to our webinar series, this is a monthly webinar focusing on a variety of physical education subjects and topics. Some of our past webinar topics have included PE teachers presenting on specific activities like assessment, fitness, classroom management, and PE advocacy. Past presenters have included Dr. Robert Pangrazi, Dr. John Medina, and Jean Blades. Our presenters have done a great job of bringing useful topics and information to the field of physical education. Our webinars will almost always occur the third week of the month. All attendees of today's webinar will receive a certificate of participation for 1 hour of educational credit, and also today all attendees will be entered to win a set of 6 UltraFit yoga mats valued at $135. Today's webinar is titled Yoga in Physical Education with Nicole Cardoza. And before I introduce Nicole, I wanted to mention that you will have the chance to ask questions during the presentation. If you look on the lower right-hand side of your screen, you should see a Q&A area, and you can type in a question at any time throughout the presentation. Questions are only visible to me, the moderator, so feel free to ask away throughout the presentation, and we will have a chance to get to as many of those questions as possible with Nicole at the end of her presentation. Today, I do have the pleasure of introducing our presenter, Nicole Cardoza. Nicole is an experienced children's yoga instructor, a former yoga instructor in schools, and the founder and executive director of Yoga Foster, an organization that empowers school teachers with yoga resources for the classroom. Nicole felt compelled to start Yoga Foster after her experience as a volunteer yoga instructor in schools. Realizing firsthand the lack of accessibility to physical activity, she started training public school teachers with tools for effective yoga in the classroom. At this time, I will pass it on to our presenter, Nicole. It's all yours.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you all for joining us today. I'll be sharing a little bit about Yoga Foster and how we empower school teachers to leverage yoga for the classroom, particularly gym teachers, and how yoga can help support a comprehensive physical education program. So a bit about Yoga Foster. Yoga Foster is a nonprofit that helps schools integrate yoga in the classroom, as you've heard. So we work directly with school teachers to help them bring simple yoga poses, breathing techniques, and mindfulness practices into schools. Our teachers use this in a variety of ways, as I mentioned, both with classroom movement, during PE, which we'll focus on before and after school as well. And all of our resources provided are completely secular, so there's no religious or spiritual ties, which is really important when we start thinking about bringing this activity into the school system. Over the past 2.5 years, we've worked with 500 schools and 800 teachers in 40 states around the U.S., so we've been growing pretty quickly. And I'll tell you a little bit more about how our program works. So there's 3 main components about our programs. The first part is a training. So we have a full professional development program to train teachers on how to safely lead yoga and mindfulness in the classroom during the day. So this is about a 10-hour training that teachers can do online. So it's virtual and it's completely self-paced. And you can do this over the course of a few weeks or, get it all in on a weekend if you so choose. And through that, there's videos, there's quizzes, there's lesson plans that talk about the foundations of mindfulness, the foundations of the yoga practice, but also looking at its application in limited space with limited time and limited resources. In that professional development, there's a whole unit on self-care for teachers. What we believe is that teachers should pursue their own practice in yoga and mindfulness in order to safely and effectively deliver it to the classroom. So it's really nice. It's a dual program where teachers can learn how this can help them and then how to safely integrate it into their setting. The second part are the resources that we provide. We have a full curriculum that's developed to help kids grow in this practice physically, mentally, and emotionally over the course of the entire school year. That includes lesson plans that do short yoga breaks that teachers can do in their classrooms, long-form yoga classes that can be leveraged in the gym setting, take-home worksheets for kids to be able to bring home or for a gym teacher to extend to other teachers in the school to practice, and other opportunities to get the parents involved, other stakeholders involved, as in how to safely lead a professional development course on this inside the school day, how parents can help reiterate some of these concepts at home, etc. So that's the second point of what we do. The last part is yoga mats. So we have access to free and discounted yoga mats for a safe space to practice, and we make sure that every teacher that comes in has the opportunity to use those. Those are particularly important for leveraging yoga in the gym setting when there is a bit more space sometimes to be able to stretch out and roll out a yoga mat. And we're seeing really great results from this across the board. Obviously, we know that getting kids moving is critical at this time, and it helps not only increase physical activity happening in the school setting, but increase the physical aptitude of students, so enabling them to feel a bit more confident and strong in their bodies, which encourages them to participate more during gym or recess and other forms of physical activity. We're also seeing this affect test scores and other academic performance metrics during the day by increasing the focus and calm that students can have, and enables them to work better on their tests and get a better grade. And emotionally, we're seeing kids be able to collaborate more effectively with one another, have decreases in outbursts of behavior and negative behavior that might send them to the principal's office. So we're really excited about that. How can you use it, and particularly in a gym setting? What I love is that there's so many applications of movement and mindfulness that can happen. The first thing that we see, and what all of our teachers use most often, even our gym teachers, is the short yoga bursts. And those are 10-minute yoga breaks that can be brought into the gym setting, either at the beginning of the class or at the end of the class, or used as a transitional period of movement between one and the next. They take about 10 minutes of time, and they're also very limited in the space that they need. So although you can use a yoga mat during this time, it's actually designed to be used without one. So standing poses, gentle twists, and places where kids don't have to place their hands onto the floor. Also full-length yoga classes. So some of our teachers create an entire yoga unit throughout the course of the PE school year, where they are focusing on yoga for that time, and they're building from pose to pose as the kids progress over a 6 or 8 week length course. And I think that's a really effective way to give kids the foundations of a yoga practice and enable them to carry that with them throughout time. The last way most of our teachers are using this is all the time, in the sense that how can they use the foundations of being more mindful and more aware of their bodies in any shape and form throughout the day. An example of this is just using a yoga pose in line, having kids align their bodies and stand nice and tall and centered while they're getting into line to move to another place in the school, enables them to kind of check in a bit, reground themselves, center themselves before moving on. Also, breathing techniques that we provide through this is highly effective for keeping kids regulated and calm when there's high periods of transition, whether that's physical transition, where kids are actively working out and moving around in gym class, or mentally moving from one place to the next, moving from one group setting to another. Having those tools to calm down really helps them. An example of this that we use quite often is flower and candle breathing, and a lot of you might be familiar with this. In this breathing technique, kids are encouraged to center themselves, whether they're seated or they're standing, and I encourage you to do the same wherever you are. And in one hand, you pretend to hold a flower, and then the other hand, pretend to hold a candle. And smell the flower, breathing in through the nose, and blow out the candle, breathing out through the mouth. Using that technique multiple times enables them to slowly calm down and really regulate themselves before they transition on. An added benefit of leveraging movement and mindfulness in the classroom setting is the benefits that it provides to the teachers. So enabling teachers to take a break and actually practice alongside kids is proven to decrease stress and make them more effective in teaching and classroom management and feel a bit more connected to students in the work. And I think that's a really important point of being able to bring this in, is that this is a practice collectively that everyone can do together, regardless of age, regardless of status, regardless if you're the teacher or the student. And to be able to settle the class and ground the class in that collectively really helps to foster a happier learning environment. Some more details on just how to get started with us. On yogafoster.org/overview, you can learn more about the cost of our programs and grant opportunities. There's an opportunity to enter your email on that page to sign up for sample curriculums. We can send you a lot more about this stuff, as well as get program overviews, FAQs for administration. My email is also here. I would love to chat with you guys about that too if you have any personal questions, although we have plenty of time to discuss that on this webinar. And the last thing I'll mention is we also have a blog with some resources for educators that are looking for quick ways to integrate this into the classroom. I ran through this pretty quickly because I thought it would be more beneficial to have an open space for Q&A, and I see a couple of questions coming in. So if you want to take a second to center yourselves and think about some of the questions you have in terms of implementation, I'm happy to answer them.
Great, thanks, Nicole. Yeah, so for those, again, a reminder, on the right-hand side, lower right, you can ask any questions that you might have for Nicole, and we'll go ahead and get to a few of those right now. So the first question, Nicole, do you always make the kids leave their shoes on, or tennis shoes hard on the mats? And I think, you know, not only an equipment question, but also from an effectiveness of how you want the kids to be participating in yoga.
Great question. We have teachers that do this in both ways. I think when we think about the best practice of yoga, it's beneficial to have students take their shoes off because they're able to ground themselves a bit more and understand how their weight is being distributed in their feet more evenly. With that being said, we know there's a lot of limitations to having a group of kids take off their shoes, especially at scale. Leaving the shoes on is still safe for the practice based on how we've put together our programs and the poses that we use. So we're really conscious of that. Are they hard on the mats? They're a little bit harder on the mats than obviously going barefoot, but it doesn't wear them down significantly over time. So it is safe and effective to practice. And most of our teachers, when they have their students keeping their shoes on, are practicing yoga poses and breathing techniques that are accessible to do without the use of a yoga mat. So you also have that opportunity. It doesn't conflict. I hope that helps.
Yeah, sure. Another question that came in, what is the youngest age that you use the curriculum?
Right now, I think we have 12% of our teachers are pre-K teachers. So that's the youngest that we're using that with right now.
Okay. And can you touch on maybe a little bit more kind of how teachers are using this as activity breaks within the classroom, and what kind of time is, a good amount of time to allot for something like that?
Absolutely. So the curriculum that's most used in our programs is our yoga bursts, and those are designed to be 10-minute yoga breaks. They can be condensed into 8 minutes or extended into 12 minutes. So teachers have some flexibility with using the curriculum in that way. All of the poses, breathing techniques that are used in that are designed to be done standing next to a desk or seated at the desk. So getting back to this idea of we don't have the time to take off shoes, we don't have the space to, roll out yoga mats, and we only have a couple of minutes to practice anyway. So what teachers will do is use it as a transitional piece where it starts with grounding the students seated in their chairs. They'll do a couple of breathing techniques and chair-assisted yoga poses where they're seated, their weight is being supported by the chair, their backs are usually supported by the backs of the chairs if those are available, and they do a couple of light stretches and movements. Then students stand and do a bit more, that take up more physical space. And then at the end, they come and sit back down again, and then ground themselves again to move into the next space. So it's really light, very simple movement and really easy, but it's full activity from beginning to end physically, and maintaining a low heart rate or lower heart rate than more active forms of physical activity, and maintaining a really calm and centered environment.
Great. Any suggestions in your experience as far as how either PE teachers can work with classroom teachers in communicating with an administrator or a principal on doing this in their classroom, or how classroom teachers themselves might, run this by their administrator that they want to start doing something like this in the classroom. I can see this being a situation where a PE teacher might, suggest it to their classroom colleague, and there might be some questions about, well, how should we pitch this to the administrator? Any experiences you've had in that area?
Sure. So when any teacher signs up to work with us, what we do is we provide them with a whole packet on how to share this with colleagues, and that includes a presentation that's really basic that goes over the 101s of yoga and mindfulness and Yoga Fostered. It also provides a sample letter to administrators, a presentation to administrators, more details around the spirituality of yoga more broadly and how it's not integrated in our curriculum, and the step-by-step guide on making this happen, even how you can use this stuff in 10 minutes every day in your classroom, just to give the classroom teacher a taste of what this would look like if and when they're ready to proceed. And I find that to be really helpful because usually our entry point into schools is with the PE teacher who's interested in doing this and wants to be able to have the same language fostered around the school setting. So we spent a lot of time working with those teachers to say, okay, what would you need and how would you feel best empowered to be able to extend that outwards?
Good. You'd mentioned the spirituality part of it, and a question we had from a teacher who works in a Catholic school where they have had issues with yoga from a religious standpoint for some parents. Any suggestions on how to address that?
Sure. And we see that a lot, especially with some of the Catholic schools that we work with, so I hear you on that. We have a whole section in our resources on this because we think it's really important. What we say about yoga is it helps you connect to who you are, and that has nothing to do, who you are is separate from what the practice does. So if you are a very religious person or a spiritual person, that's great, and if you're not, you're not. This is just about connecting in with who we are, and that's it. The language that we use, all of the poses are really basic English names. We don't use any Sanskrit. We don't use Om. We avoid prayer hands and things like that just feel a little, that feel like they could be pulling from other places where a teacher might not feel comfortable with it. So we make sure that all of that's really laid out for our teachers, and they have resources to send home to parents. So parents have that same language. So everybody's on the same page before it begins, and we encourage our teachers to have that discussion before implementing any of these resources with students, making sure that parents are aware. And that's from sending something home to, hosting a meeting with parents or having something on parent-teacher night at the beginning of the year, another presentation that's similar to what we have for teachers, but designed for parents to answer those questions. I think that if you're running into things throughout the year, you can also talk about how the poses help build kids' strength and academic performance. And I think when parents see that, it helps them ground movement and mindfulness into something that feels a bit more physical, like any other sport or physical practice, than something that feels really spiritual. Does that help?
Yeah, for sure. I know that, my limited experience with yoga, technique seems to be a big part of it. Any certain poses that you really need to be careful about in doing correctly?
Yes. So for us, the poses that we have are safe for the classroom and effective for classrooms, thinking about students, developing spines, thinking about the lack of space. One thing I'm very cautious about in yoga programs in general is any inversions. So any poses where kids are upside down, and beyond that, any pose that has a child's head below their heart, if that makes sense. So even not like an upside down pose, but like a forward bend, making sure that kids are really supported and safe there. We want to make sure that the spine is long instead of really rounded. We want to make sure that the back of the neck isn't compressed in any way, which you see a lot in headstands or handstands. So those are ones that I would be really cautious about when bringing into the classroom. And when you're considering doing yoga, it might be looking at a different training. Think about how those might not be as effective for kids. Also, think about how kids love the idea of flipping themselves upside down. So making sure that you're being really strong about what poses you're going to teach and how far you're willing this practice to go in a physical perspective in your space.
Great. We did have a question about somebody who was asking about if we were going to get into some of the specific poses and things like that. This webinar is really an introduction to a tool or a resource to bring yoga into your classroom. And for more information, and Nicole, maybe you can touch on this, one of the other questions related to this is, okay, now what? I'm interested. What should I do next?
Sure. I think an easy thing is just email me if you have any specific questions or you want to have specific resources that you might not find on our site. The other thing that you can do if you're interested is to apply for a grant or sign up for our emails to learn more as an educator. I think it's on the bottom of yogafoster.org/overview. There's a lot of ways to get in to get in touch with us. But if there's something specific that's burning on your mind, like if we're a vendor in a certain school district, if you want to see 5 poses that are really easy and simple and that do work, that are safe, just email me. I'm happy to send that over to you this evening.
Great. And this is kind of a bit of a technical question with yoga. When it sounds like this is coming from somebody who's already doing some yoga in their classes, when resting at the end of a practice, do you recommend getting the students to stay in corpse pose with legs straight or bent knees, or does it matter if the student rests on their side or stomach?
A great question. This is a multifaceted question. I'll answer it in a short way, and then whoever asked that, if I don't fully respond to it, please email me. We recommend resting in a lot of different ways. Corpse pose, which we call do nothing pose because we're really conscious of the word corpse and the connotation that can have for certain students. It involves lying on your back and you're completely prostrate or down on the floor. In that pose, that would be something that we would use with a mat. We wouldn't use it without a mat. We have alternatives to doing a restful pose when you don't have a yoga mat, so that's one. I think that the options for kids having their legs straight or bent knees or on their side or stomach depends on the age of the students and the context of the class. So I don't think I answered that fully. There's a lot of pieces in there, so please email me if that was your question and we can chat more about it. But in general, I think that all of those options are fine when you know the age of the students and the structure of the class.
Great. And this is appropriate for all the way through high school, correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And I think, some folks are thinking along the lines of, okay, this is a curriculum for sure, and it's structured, and there's information on how I communicate, and, there's a scope and a sequence sort of a thing to this. Can you give our audience maybe a little bit of an idea from a cost standpoint? I know we've had a couple of questions about that, and that's sometimes a difficult question to answer depending on number of students and some of those sorts of things, but can you shed some light on that?
Sure. So the way it works is you're not going to see this on our site until tomorrow, ironically, but the way that our programs are going to work is our full program costs $500, and that's the training, the curriculum, and implementation guide, so how to break all of this down and all of these things that I'm telling you in a simple way for parents, for students, for colleagues, etc. And that's a forever access to Yoga Foster and all of the resources that we have on an ongoing basis. If you're interested in just getting lesson plans and curriculum because you have an established yoga practice, those will be available for $10 a month. If you're interested in just doing the training and learning a little bit more about that, that's going to be $250. So we can talk a little bit more about that, and I can send you more resources. But we do have full and partial grants for teachers at Title I schools. So I highly encourage you, if you're interested in that and you know that, apply on our site because that'll make it significantly cheaper and or free. So.
Great. And I know there's been some questions from some specific school districts about whether or not Yoga Foster is an approved vendor. If you run into those hurdles and you've done business with Gopher in the past, more than likely Gopher is an approved vendor with your school district, give Gopher a call, give me a call. We can, we've done this with other folks where, we can take care of the purchase order through Gopher as an approved vendor to Yoga Foster as well.
Fantastic. Thank you for that.
Let's see. I think one of our, last question. This is another one that is a little bit on the technical side. Do you find the faster moving salutations or holding poses work best for children? It seems that holding a pose is too challenging for them. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, great question. So our yoga flows, our sequences, so the speed from moving from one pose to the next, tends to be a lot faster than you see in a grown-ups class, so a class that you might go to at a studio near you, and most children's yoga flows, because we believe that getting kids moving and keeping them flowing from one pose to the next is more effective for them, and they get more out of it physically and mentally than holding for an extended period of time. There's certainly opportunities to hold opposed to figure it out, you know, to feel it and to adjust and move, but it's not about holding that pose and tightening up all the muscles and feeling really strict. It's more about standing tall in that pose and kind of feeling where your weight is in your feet, right, or how far you can stretch your arms up. So it's a faster flow, not as much emphasis on holding, but when we are holding, we're just kind of exploring that pose.
Great, thank you. And that is going to conclude. Before we let you go, we do want to announce the winner of our Ultra Fit set of 6 rainbow yoga mats. And the winner is Jackie Harvey, a PE teacher at Stacy Middle School in Milford, Massachusetts. Everybody keep an eye out for your certificate of participation in today's webinar, and also details on next month's topic and webinar. Thank you so much, Nicole. Very good presentation, and we hope everybody enjoyed it, and we hope to see everybody back here next month for our next webinar. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.